If your dog started barking like his life depended on it just minutes after your daughter left for the weekend, would you know something was wrong? Ben Carter didn't, not at first. He was too focused on the quiet that settled over the house like a thick fog the moment Lily's small backpack disappeared into her mother's car. The divorce had been final for 9 months, but the ache was still fresh. Shared custody meant Lily's laughter was only around half the week, and when it was gone, the silence was almost unbearable. That afternoon, Ben was just rinsing off syrupy dishes, trying not to feel the sting of goodbye, when Duke's bark tore through the walls like a siren. Duke was no ordinary dog. He was a 5-year-old German Shepherd with a soldier's posture and a child's loyalty. Ben had adopted him with Lily when she turned 3, a trip to the shelter that had become one of the happiest days of Ben's adult life. Since the divorce, Duke had taken on a new role: protector of the quiet house, guardian of the man who was still figuring out how to be a part-time dad. Normally, Duke was calm, cautious, and alert. But the sound Ben heard that day wasn't his usual bark. It was something wild, panicked, almost desperate. Ben wiped his hands on his jeans and rushed toward the back door. Through the glass, he saw Duke pacing near the fence, tail stiff, body lowered like he was ready to attack. Ben's heart started to race. Their backyard was fenced in, surrounded by thick brush and ivy, a favorite hangout for squirrels and the occasional raccoon. But this wasn't a game of chase. Duke was growling, teeth bared, eyes locked on something low in the grass. Ben opened the door and stepped out, immediately hit by the late spring heat and the electric sense that something wasn't right. It took him a second to see her, a small gray cat, barely bigger than a football, writhing beneath the deck. She let out a sharp, high-pitched cry that cut straight through the afternoon. Her fur was fluffed up in fear, and her back leg kicked uncontrollably. Ben took a step closer and froze. Just beside her was a snake, thick-bodied and motionless for a split second before coiling tighter, its head slightly raised. The pattern on its skin looked too familiar. Ben's stomach dropped. A copperhead. Venomous, aggressive, and far too close to home. The cat, he recognized her. She'd been lurking around for weeks. Lily had named her Stormy because of her dark coat. They'd never gotten close, but she always showed up near the fence when Duke was outside, sitting just beyond reach, curious but wary. Ben had started leaving food out. She never let him touch her, but she kept coming back. Now she was clearly in pain, and the snake's presence made it obvious why. Her leg was already swelling. Bite marks, maybe more than one. The cries were weaker now, fading fast. Duke's growls deepened. He was trembling from head to paw, locked in place like a statue. Ben could see the tension in his shoulders, the decision building inside him. One wrong move and he could be bitten too. Duke, no, Ben said, barely above a whisper, not even sure if he wanted him to hold back or attack. Then, as if something snapped inside him, Duke leapt forward in a blur of muscle and fury. The snake struck at the same time. The two collided in a whirlwind of dirt, snarls, and chaos. Ben ran forward without thinking, heart pounding, yelling Duke's name. But it was already happening, too fast to stop, too wild to control. The snake twisted violently, mouth wide open, fangs aiming for flesh. Duke snapped his jaws around the snake's midsection and shook violently. There was a yelp. Ben couldn't tell who it came from. Then, just as fast as it started, it was over. The snake fell limp in Duke's jaws. He dropped it, panting, blood dripping from a cut near his snout. Stormy was curled into a shaking ball, her breath shallow. Her leg looked twice its normal size. Ben crouched beside her, unsure of what to do first. Duke was beside him, still on high alert but no longer aggressive, his eyes flicking between Ben and the injured cat. "Easy," Ben muttered, mostly to himself. He reached toward Stormy slowly. She didn't move, didn't run. Just stared at him with wide, glazed eyes, too weak to fight back. She needed help. Now, Ben scooped her up carefully, surprised by how light she was. Her body was all bone beneath the fur. As he stood, Duke followed closely, tail low, whimpering under his breath. Inside, Ben laid the cat gently on a towel and grabbed his phone. The nearest emergency vet was 15 minutes away. He explained the situation through shallow breaths, adrenaline still flooding his system. The receptionist told him to come immediately, they'd be ready. Ben wrapped Stormy in another towel, opened the truck door, and called for Duke. He didn't hesitate. They were going together. As he drove, then kept glancing at Stormy in the passenger seat and Duke in the back. His mind raced not just about the cat or the snake, but about Lily. What if she'd been playing in that yard when the snake showed up? What if Duke hadn't been there? His hands gripped the wheel tighter. The house had felt empty that morning. But now, as they sped down the road with an injured cat, a wounded dog, and a strange sense of purpose, Ben realized something he hadn't felt in a long time. He was needed, and for the first time in months, that meant everything. The emergency vet clinic smelled like antiseptic and urgency. Ben pushed through the glass door with Stormy wrapped in a faded towel, her breathing shallow, her body limp. A vet tech rushed over the moment she saw the swelling on the cat's leg and the dry blood on Duke's snout. "Snake bite?" she asked without looking up. Ben nodded, his voice caught in his throat. "Copperhead, I think." Stormy was whisked away behind swinging doors while another tech knelt beside Duke, gently inspecting the wound on his muzzle. He winced but didn't resist. He stayed close to Ben, ears back, tail still. Ben stood in the waiting room with blood on his shirt, the towel damp in his hands, and the weight of helplessness pressing down like a cement block on his chest. The overhead lights were too bright, the floor too clean. He kept thinking about Lily, about how Duke had probably saved that cat's life. Maybe even her life, if the snake had stayed in the yard long enough. And what had he done? Hesitated, froze, let his dog do the dangerous part. Guilt burned under his ribs, even as he tried to remind himself he had gotten them here, he had acted. Still, it didn't feel like enough. After what felt like an hour but was maybe only 15 minutes, a young vet named Dr. Ramirez came out and motioned for Ben to sit. She spoke gently, but didn't sugarcoat it. "The cat, Stormy. She's hanging in there, but the venom is spreading fast. We're giving her antivenom and fluids, but she's severely underweight, and her immune system is compromised." "Did you say she's a stray?" Ben nodded. "Been around my yard for a while. My daughter feeds her crackers." Dr. Ramirez sighed. "She wouldn't have made it another hour." "And your dog? He's got a puncture near his nose." "We'll clean it, but he's lucky it wasn't worse." Ben nodded, running a hand over his face. "Can I see them?" She led him to the back, past kennels and machines and more animals in distress. Stormy was in a small oxygen box, her body lined with tubes and sensors, but her eyes were half open. She blinked slowly when Ben leaned in. Something about her gaze hit him in the chest, grateful, exhausted, resigned. In the next room, Duke was lying on a mat, stitched and bandaged, but alert. He perked up the moment he saw Ben and wagged his tail. Ben knelt down and hugged him tight, burying his face in his neck. "You did good, buddy," he whispered. Later that night, Ben sat alone in his truck in the clinic parking lot. Stormy had to stay overnight. Duke was cleared to go home, groggy from a sedative but stable. The vet had asked him the question he hadn't expected: "Are you claiming the cat?" He had said no, automatically, reflexively. He wasn't even sure why. Maybe because he hadn't planned on it. Maybe because life already felt too full of things he couldn't control. But now, sitting there with the engine off and the windows down, he couldn't stop seeing Stormy's eyes. How she hadn't run. How she had trusted him, even in pain. The thought of her dying alone in a cage gnawed at him. She had survived something unthinkable. And maybe that meant something. Maybe she was meant to. Maybe Duke didn't fight that snake just to save any stray but to save her. And maybe Ben needed to ask himself why that mattered so much to him. He thought of Lily's soft voice saying, "Stormy likes us, Daddy." He thought of how empty the house felt when she wasn't there. And how maybe it didn't have to be, not completely. He started the engine, only to turn it off again, then back on, then off. Duke looked at him from the passenger seat, head tilted. "I don't know, man," Ben muttered. "You think we're ready for more?" Duke gave a low huff, then rested his head on Ben's arm. Ben stared at the glowing clinic sign through the windshield, his heart heavy but alive in a way it hadn't been in months. He reached for the door handle slowly. "All right," he said. "We're not walking away." Inside, the overnight staff was surprised to see him back. "I'd like to claim her," he said, voice steady now. "Stormy, the cat, I want to pay for whatever she needs. She's not just some stray, she matters." The receptionist gave a soft smile and slid a clipboard toward him. As he signed, he felt something shift, small, but undeniable. Like he had stepped into a new version of his life. One where he didn't let fear keep him still. One where he said yes, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. When Ben and Duke got home that night, it was late and quiet. The towel was still on the floor, the one Stormy had bled on. Ben didn't throw it away. He folded it and set it gently on the couch, like a placeholder, like he was saving a spot. Duke curled up beside it, eyes watching the front door as if he already knew she'd be back. Ben stood in the doorway for a long time, unsure of what tomorrow would bring, but clear on one thing: they weren't alone anymore. Not really, not again. Stormy came home 3 days later, thinner than before, still weak, but alive. The vet handed her over in a soft carrier with instructions, medications, and cautious optimism. "She's a fighter," Dr. Ramirez said with a smile, "but she need time. Patience, safety." Ben nodded, gripping the carrier like it held something sacred. Duke sniffed the mesh door on the ride home, tail wagging low, a quiet sort of excitement. Stormy didn't hiss or flinch. She just stared at him, slow blinking. That unspoken exchange said more than Ben could understand. But it felt like something ancient: recognition, maybe gratitude. Back home, Ben turned the guest room into a recovery space. A soft blanket in a box, food and water, litter box in the corner. He kept the room dim and quiet. Duke sat outside the door the first night, ears perked, occasionally letting out a soft whine. Stormy barely moved those first days. She slept, mostly, ate a little. But each time Ben entered, she looked at him, now not through him. Her eyes followed his hands as he placed fresh water. She let him touch her head briefly. That 1 second of contact felt electric, like something thawing between them. The following weekend, Lily came back. She dropped her backpack at the door and ran straight into Ben's arms like always. "Where's Duke?" she shouted. He pointed toward the kitchen, and she raced in but stopped dead in her tracks when she saw the little gray cat curled on a blanket. Her eyes widened. "You brought her inside." Ben crouched beside her. "She got hurt. Duke saved her. We're helping her get better." Lily knelt down quietly, holding her breath. Stormy didn't run, didn't hiss. She just stared at the little girl who had named her weeks before. And then slowly Stormy blinked. Lily beamed. "That means she likes me, Daddy. That's a cat hug." Ben chuckled, surprised by the emotion tightening in his throat. He said, "I think it is." That evening, the three of them sat on the floor in the guest room. Stormy rested in Lily's lap. Duke lay nearby, calm as ever. It was the first time since the divorce that the house didn't feel like to have split down the middle. There was a new rhythm, now slower, more delicate, but whole in a way Ben hadn't expected. The girl, the dog, the cat, and the men, each a little broken, each healing in their own way. Word spread quickly. Ben told the story to a coworker at the garage, who shared it with his wife, who posted about it in the neighborhood Facebook group. Soon, people were commenting, "That's the cat I used to see by the school. Is that the same shepherd that helped that hiker last year?" Someone even suggested contacting the local paper. Ben laughed it off at first, but when a young journalist showed up one afternoon asking for an interview, something in him said yes. Maybe the story mattered more than he realized. Maybe it wasn't just about the snake. The article was published online the next day. Divorced dad, brave dog, and one lucky cat. How a backyard battle sparked a new beginning. There was a photo of Ben and Lily, with Duke in the center, Stormy curled up in Lily's arms. The article was honest, not dramatic, but full of heart. Ben didn't read the comments at first, but one night, curiosity won. "This gave me hope. My dad went through something like this. Thank you for not giving up on her." The words weren't loud, but they stuck. Strangers, moved by a cat who lived and a man who stayed. Ben didn't feel like a hero. He still messed up co-parenting schedules, still forgot to buy almond milk, still got that sinking feeling every time Lily left for her mom's. But now there was a new layer to his days. Stormy started following him from room to room. She'd sleep on the windowsill while he made coffee, curl up on the back of the couch during movie nights. Duke didn't seem to mind sharing the spotlight. If anything, he looked proud, protective. The three of them were becoming a pack of fragile, mismatched, imperfect family. Stormy's leg never healed completely. She walked with one paw always slightly tilted. But she moved with quiet confidence, a survivor's grace. Lily started telling her friends at school, "We have a disabled cat and a hero dog." Her pride was contagious. She even drew a comic strip about them for a class project, Duke and Stormy, backyard guardians. Ben put it on the fridge. Every time he saw it, he felt something settle in his chest, a quiet kind of peace. A reminder that he was building something even if it looked nothing like the life he once planned. One night, a letter came in the mail. Handwritten, addressed to the man who saved Stormy. It was from a woman down the street who had lost her cat to a snake years ago. She wrote, "Reading about you gave me closure I didn't know I needed." Ben read it twice, then a third time. He folded it gently and placed it in a drawer beside Lily's drawings. That's when he understood what they had gone through wasn't just personal. It was something bigger, a ripple. A reminder that acts of courage, however small, don't end where they happen. They travel, they grow. On a warm evening a few weeks later, Ben found himself standing in the yard again, near the same fence, looking out at the space where it all happened. Duke sat beside him, Stormy perched quietly on the deck railing. The grass had grown back, the ivy still curled along the wood. But the feeling was different now. The fear was gone, in its place was something softer. Ben looked down at Duke, then up at the sky. He wasn't just surviving anymore, they weren't just getting by. They were something new now, defined not by what they lost, but by what they chose to keep. Mornings were different now. Ben woke up earlier than he used to, not because he had to, but because the quiet no longer felt like emptiness. It felt like calm. Duke would stretch beside the bed with a lazy yawn, and Stormy would be waiting near the hallway, tail curling delicately, eyes blinking in that slow way she did when she was content. Ben started making 2 cups of coffee, one for himself, and one for the thermos Lily liked to take when she stayed over. Some mornings she was there, some mornings she wasn't, but either way, the house never felt hollow anymore. Stormy's limp never slowed her down. She climbed onto windowsills, chased shadows on the rug, and had developed a habit of curling up on top of Ben's boots, as if claiming them. Duke followed her everywhere, a silent guardian. He still watched the backyard every afternoon, especially near the fence. It had become a ritual, Ben sitting on the porch with his coffee, Duke lying at his feet, Stormy perched above them like a queen. No one spoke, but there was something sacred in that stillness, a pact, a shared understanding of what they had survived. Lily had taken to calling them the Rescue Squad. She painted a sign with their names, Ben, Duke, Stormy, and hung it above the kitchen table. She even asked Ben if they could print shirts. "We're a real team, Daddy," she said one night, brushing Stormy's fur with careful fingers. Like superheroes, but quiet ones, Ben had smiled, not trusting his voice enough to answer. There was a time, not long ago, when he didn't feel like anyone's hero. But now, looking at her face, and Duke's loyal gaze, and Stormy's unblinking eyes, he realized he didn't need to feel like one. He just needed to show up. The local elementary school invited Ben and Lily to share their story for a class reading day. He almost said no, public speaking wasn't his thing, but Lily begged, and Stormy had become something of a legend among her friends, so they went. Lily read from a notebook with big block letters. Ben just stood beside her, holding Duke's leash, heart pounding. When they finished, the room clapped. A little boy raised his hand and asked, "Did the cat forgive the snake?" Lily looked up at Ben, and sure, he smiled gently. "She didn't have to forgive it," he said. "She just chose to keep living." After that day, people started showing up at the garage not for repairs, but to talk. One man brought his dog, asking for advice on building trust again after a rough adoption. A teenager asked if he could volunteer on weekends. Someone even dropped off a box of handmade cat beds with a sticky note, "For Stormy, thank you for giving her a second chance." Ben didn't always know what to say to people, but he listened. He shared what he could. And slowly, the garage became more than a workplace. It became part of the story, a quiet corner of town where healing had happened. Ben began writing things down. At first, just notes to himself, small reflections, scribbled phrases. But they turned into entries, then pages, then chapters. He never planned to write a book, but one night, after Lily fell asleep beside Stormy on the couch and Duke lay snoring at his feet, Ben opened his laptop and typed the first line. "This isn't a story about a snake. It's about what came after." The words poured out faster than he expected. It wasn't polished, and it wasn't perfect, but it was true. and that made it enough. On Stormy's survival day, they held a quiet celebration. No guests, just the three of them. Ben made tuna treats. Lily drew a new comic. Duke wore a paper crown. They didn't talk about the snake. They didn't need to. What mattered was that Stormy had lived and, in doing so, had helped them all start living again. Later that night, Ben lit a candle and placed it by the window, a soft glow in the dark. Not in memory of loss but in honor of what was saved. A ritual they would repeat each year, a promise to never forget. Some nights, Ben still thought about the what ifs. What if Duke hadn't barked? What if he hadn't gone outside? What if he hadn't said yes to bringing her home? But those thoughts no longer led to fear. They led to gratitude. Because each decision, hesitant, imperfect, instinctual, had brought them here, to this home, this rhythm, this bond that no one could see but everyone could feel. A man, a dog, a cat, wounded, maybe, but not broken, together. The neighbors began calling them the Quiet Miracle House. It wasn't about fame. It wasn't about pity. It was about something people longed for but didn't always have words for: connection, redemption. The idea that healing doesn't always roar, it often arrives in silence, in slow blinks, in warm paws against your foot while you make coffee. Ben never tried to explain it. He just let people see it for themselves when they visited. And they always left softer than when they came in. He didn't just save a cat. He didn't just protect his daughter's dog. He didn't just survive a divorce. He learned how to stay even when it hurt, even when it was hard. And because of that, Stormy lived, Duke thrived, Lily felt safe, and Ben found something better than peace. He found purpose. And every time he heard the quiet purr of a cat on the windowsill, or felt the weight of a dog's head on his knee, he remembered. Sometimes the life you didn't plan ... is the one that saves you.